and that's a similar kind of a thing of our mindset was we're in danger, we're willing to give up a little freedom or something that might be unconstitutional or this.
And I think that's important to remember. So I mean, I told Nathaniel this
awesome.
I took my mother to the Houston days after
Oh, sorry.
This should be better.
Because now we can't see that.
And it was packed this morning. With international.
Sorry, we're getting you there. Oh!
I will never
We're getting you there.
forget
Hold on one
the first
second.
time I looked out and there's a window, a cold, and there's a ledge there. And sitting on the ledge were
Okay.
six, I'm assuming, maybe not, I don't know where they were from, Saudi women that were
Yeah.
dressed head to toe in the black, but with the scarf around it. And it's the first time I had seen a row of them, you know, and I just, you know, it was shocking to me, you know, I had just never, so it's
Yeah,
the first time you see that face of someone that you have been told is just killed your people, you know, so, you know, so there's this, it's a process, you know, so it's, I think it's
I would challenge that if they were American citizens, it's a different.
Well, they weren't American citizens,
Right.
they were going home as fast as they could.
Right. But you know, hi, let's transition over.
Hey, hi guys.
Hi. We're so happy you're with us digitally.
Oh, I am so thrilled about this. I cannot tell you. I'm jumping out of my skin.
We've been talking a little bit about the play, but why don't you start with like your process and how? I mean, this play has had a long journey. Everyone saw it in the play that we sent out. The journey is outlined in there. But talk about the beginning of this, where it started.
Well, the first time I heard the details about Gordon's story was when I was watching this documentary film that was on PBS, and which I think I sent the link to Gurley, and it's called A Personal Matter, Gordon Hirobayashi versus the United States. It was made by a Seattle filmmaker, John DeGraff, who I met when we had our ACT run, a lovely man, and he had done this hour-long video about Gordon, and there were details in Gordon's story that just leapt out at me. Number one, that he was a Quaker, which is very unusual for my father's generation, you know. Number two, that he hitchhiked his way to prison to serve a sentence for refusing to go to prison. What kind of person would, you know, and just a number of things about that I felt made it so unique, and also just very quintessentially American. And I thought this is a great unknown American story. It should have been in the history books. I was amazed and shocked and frustrated that I hadn't heard of Gordon until I saw that video. I mean, I had heard his name, but I didn't really know what he did, the details of his story. And then when I, you know, after I finished watching the video, it was like an obsession. It just wouldn't let me go, the story. And I woke up thinking about it. I went to bed thinking about it. And so I started to do a little more research about Gordon. And then coincidentally, I got a play. I got an opportunity to do a play at the Intiman Theater in Seattle. So I had a chance to go up there, and I found out that Gordon's letters were all housed in the University of Washington Special Collections. So that, by now, and then I read a poem about Gordon, written by a Japanese-American poet, David Mura, who talked about when Gordon came to his class to talk to his students. It was like for David, whose father, like mine, had never talked about the years of incarceration. It was like a big hole, big gap was filled when Gordon came in and talked so eloquently about that period. So it felt that way for me too. And so, and then I discovered a book called The Courage of Their Convictions by Dr. Peter Irons, formerly of UC San Diego in La Jolla, constitutional law professor, and he wrote this beautiful book about Americans who had stood up for their constitutional rights. And Gordon's story was one of those chapters. And so for the first time, I read in Gordon's own words about those years. And he had a delightful voice and a delightful personality that came across in this article. So all these things put together just sort of fanned the obsession, fueled the fire, so to speak. And I can honestly say it almost didn't feel like I had a choice. I had to try and write this play. And it took a long time, but we finally crossed across the finish line. And but that's how it all started, was watching that video.
We're so glad you did write the play.
Yeah.
I think all of us are. Does anyone have questions for the playwright, which is such a treat to have you here?
Oh,
I do. Hi, Jeannie. It's Girly.
Hi, Girly.
So I was actually really struck by Gordon's. You know that part in the story where you talk about how Gordon just kind of showed up at the camp. Like, is all of that true? Because I mean, just thinking about things that are happening today with regards to just taking a stand, you often hear about violence occurring, with the people who are taking a stand, and that was never really mentioned in the story. So I'm interested to hear, like, how did that all really transpire? Like, is that really true?
Are you talking about Gordon's hitchhiking trip when you say he just showed up at the prison camp?
Exactly. He wasn't escorted. He just kind of
that was the surprising thing, and one of the things that was intriguing to me, this whole hitchhiking trip. Gordon never encountered any hostility while he was hitchhiking, which was kind of astonishing. He did encounter some racial discrimination in that someone who picked him up thought he was Chinese American rather than Japanese American, and Gordon told him he was Japanese American. The guy said, "Well, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have picked you up." And Gordon replied in a very, very Gordon-esque, Quaker-like way. He said, "Well, I don't want to get a ride under false pretenses, sir. You could just drop me off at the next corner." But, Gordon was so charming, and he often charmed people who were trying to discriminate against him, as you can see in the play. And the guy ended up saying, "Well, hell, you're in the car. You might as well stay." So they drove on, and he was so taken by Gordon that he said, "Well, hell, you might as well come stay at my house for the night, and we'll give you a hot meal."
God.
And so he stayed with him, and the next day he, took him to the next point and sent him on his way. But that's not to say, of course, that violence did not happen within the community. There was violence that happened within the Japanese American community, as soon as Pearl Harbor was bombed, and then throughout this period. And, everything that the ethnic minorities are going through now, I lost track of the articles I read where someone was told, "Get out of my country." Of course, that's in one of the first scenes of Hold These Truths. And I tell people I feel very blessed that people want to know more about Gordon now. And I'm also saddened simultaneously that the story is so relevant. But Gordon was a peacemaker and had a beautiful spirit about him. And I think that people did not know what to do when they encountered him. They were befuddled.
I was befuddled.
Yeah. Yeah. So to answer your question, Girly, there was definitely violence that happened to Japanese Americans, but it didn't happen to Gordon, as far as I know, as far as what he told me.
Wow.
They weren't. I'm talking about physical violence.
Yeah.
They were certainly called names, Japs and all that. And when he was. When Mary Farquharson took up his case and his supporters in Seattle contributed funds towards his defense, they definitely got hate mail and hate calls and, Jap lovers and you're defending the enemy and all that. There was always that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Somebody has something. We were having a lively discussion before you came.
I
think you're making everyone nervous.
Go ahead. So I don't know if this is Naya. Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you and chat with you. Yes. So there's sort of like a Banksy type pop artist named Plastic Jesus, and it turns out he recently put out like a lot reserved for future internment camp signs in like different parking lots.
I've seen that.
Have you seen that? So the timeliness of this story, and of course what's going on in our political culture right now. But I just wanted to, I don't know if you've seen the article, but it's worth a read. And this story and all of that but there's executive orders on it. It has Donald Trump's seal on it, like the actual signage. It's pretty.
I think I saw that. That was on Facebook.
Yes,
right?
yes. So knowing that this was coming into our season, it was.
Yeah, and I think they were putting this up on college campuses.
Yes, yeah.
In San Diego.
Empty lots.
Yeah, I
Empty
think I did
lots.
see that.
Yeah. It's really,
Do you've done this, or you've seen many productions of this recently up at Portland and this? How do you think over time, because this debuted 10 years ago, do you feel audiences have changed over time? Because I know we're talking about it feels super hyper relevant now, but 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, how have audiences changed over time?
Well, I think that what's become apparent to me, sadly, is that there still is so much ignorance that Americans of Japanese ancestry, were even in camps. I remember when we premiered at East West Players in 2007, and the reaction we got really from the audience was that there was some knowledge about the camps, but very little knowledge about Gordon. That people had known about Fred Korematsu and Gordon and Minya Sui, who had resisted, and some about Mitsuo Endo, who were the four that took their cases, that went to the Supreme Court. But then when we did the New York production, which was a separate production, we did it off-Broadway in 2012, I really noticed a very different reaction on the East Coast. A lot of people had no idea whatsoever that this happened on the West Coast during World War II. They said, we heard something bad happen to the Japanese. We didn't really know what it was. And they were really shocked to learn that babies from orphanages, had been put behind barbed wire, or people who had served, in World War I, a veteran. A lot of them really had no idea. And I think what happened over the last 9 years is that I sort of formed in my head this idea that people on the West Coast know more than the East Coast. Well, when we did the play in Seattle and Portland, it just seemed like in the last 2 years, there were more young people that I was encountering, and people even who were in college and grad school that had no idea this had happened. Even in Seattle and Portland in the Pacific Northwest, where the story takes place. And I talked to someone in Seattle who had been the lead attorney on Fred Korematsu's case. And he said, well, that the World War II Japanese experience is not required teaching, even in West Coast schools. And I said, no, I did not know that. And I realized that, a whole generation had come up maybe in the last 10 years that the play is being done, that perhaps didn't have a teacher who taught about it. Because it's entirely up to the teachers now whether they want to teach it. So I realized that there was sort of an ongoing need for this kind of education. And now it saddens me, but it doesn't surprise me when people come up and say, we had no idea this happened. Whether that I get that comment on the East Coast or the West Coast. So I'm hoping that we had there was a seminar that was done on Minya Sui's case in Portland, because that's where Min was from, when we did the play in Portland. And we all broke up into tables in the seminar. We brainstormed how we could get the story of what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II out in the educational community more. So I know that there are efforts being made, but the fact that it isn't required teaching, I think it hinders people from really finding out all they can about it. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Danny?
Yeah, it does.
Jeannie, so given that there's all these commemoration activities happening right now about the executive order, I'm interested in highlighting things that have not been really talked about, or actually need more highlighting, I guess. So I'm wondering, what have you not heard, given your research and the people that you've interacted with, specific to Gordon's story and the internment camps, etc.?
What have I not heard? You mean in terms of questions that are asked of me, or?
Or, I mean, just with regards to the whole situation at all. I mean, because, you know, I feel like I'm in the bubble of people who are knowledgeable about this.
Yes.
Having, you know, had certain experiences from college. So I'm, you know, like some new factoids for me were that Italian and German Americans were also interned, but not at the same volume as Japanese Americans. And then the situation with the orphan youth too, I had no idea that was part of the story. So, and then also I just recently learned that Latin American Japanese were also interned and received reparations as the American Japanese Americans did. So knowing that we want to highlight a lot of kind of local stories through this story, you know, with regards to the Japanese American families in the San Gabriel Valley, like
that
what?
would be great.
Yeah, I mean, so what more can we talk about that people haven't already been talking about?
Well, if we're talking about the broader spectrum of Japanese Americans' experience during World War II, I'll just put a little parenthesis here. You know, Gordon, as someone who legally challenged orders, was part of a very small group of people. There were only 4, as you know.
Yeah.
And they were all very different. You know, Gordon was a pacifist, and I think that he, as a Quaker, it is something maybe about him that, you know, is mentioned in the play, and that people know at the end of the play. But I think perhaps his identity as a Quaker maybe is not covered as much as the fact that he, you know, issued this challenge. But I think it's really a key to who Gordon was. You know, he remained a lifelong Quaker, and it was not easy to be a conscientious objector during World War II. He got a lot of flack for that, you know, as well as the flack for just taking the stand. If we're talking about a larger swath of discussion, there were a number of people who served in the military intelligence service, you know, in the Pacific. A lot of second generation Nisei. I think actually Gordon's brother, James Hirabayashi, who was the first chief curator of the Japanese American National Museum in Little Tokyo, he's since passed away, but James Hirabayashi was very involved in the start of the Japanese American National Museum. And James wrote a very interesting article, I should send to you, try and find it, about 4 Hirabayashi cousins who all responded to World War II in different ways. And I thought that was really fascinating. You know, one served in, I think, the 442, one in the military intelligence service. What they did was they spoke Japanese fluently, and so they would translate intercepted messages, you know, from the Japanese. And they went on very dangerous missions, like Merrill's Marauders, you know, had a Nisei translator. And some of these stories have been classified for years and are just now coming out. So this is something that hardly anybody knows about, too, you know, is amazing stories of, for example, there were a couple stories I heard of brothers that were serving in the MIS and who had, whose brothers were somehow caught in Japan and couldn't make it back to the United States and actually got inducted into the Japanese army, and so were fighting against their own country.
Wow.
And brothers fighting against brothers. And an amazing story of a man in the MIS who went to find his brother in Japan after the war, realizing that they realized they had fought against each other in a specific battle.
Wow.
Just amazing stories like that. So I think the MIS is something that has not really been touched on, only because a lot of those stories have been classified and are just now, in the last few years, have been declassified.
Okay.
I would say there's a great deal of knowledge within the Japanese American community about the 442, who served so heroically, during campaigns in France and Germany and Italy. They are the most highly decorated unit, I think, in the history of the United States Army. And I think that within the Japanese community, there's knowledge of the 442, but I don't think there is within the United States at large. People don't know how it was a segregated combat unit. They weren't allowed to fight with the white soldiers. And there's stories of just great courage and determination on their part because they were fighting while their parents were incarcerated, behind barbed wire. There are amazing stories about the 100th Battalion, who's from Hawaii, and the 100th was very different for the 442 culturally because they were not in the minority in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And so they did not get along at first, the 100th and the 442. And the 100 soldiers felt that the mainland soldiers in the 442 were cowards because somebody said that somebody calls them a Jap, they just walk away. If somebody calls up a Jap, we fight them, and they said those mainland soldiers are stingy because they never treat, in Hawaiian culture, there's, the aloha culture, which is all about generosity. Well, what the Hawaiian boys didn't realize was that the mainland boys weren't getting their parents were behind bars, so there was no money to send to their sons. And the Hawaii guys would be shaking these envelopes full of ration cards, So there was a superior who decided to take the Hawaiian boys to see one of these camps. And when they did, they gained a whole new respect for their 442 compatriots because they said, you guys are fighting for your country when they're doing that to your family, and they gained a whole new respect for them. So this is just wonderful stories about the Japanese American community at large, I think. And there's more. I could sort of go on and on. There were beautiful artwork that came out of the camps.
I think I might have to spend an entire day with you, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Jeannie, this is Susan. I have a quick question along with that. I had learned a lot about the 442, but I don't think I completely put my head around the 100 battalion unit. Can you tell us? For some reason, I thought that the Hawaiians were interned as well, so they were not. The Japanese Americans in Hawaii were not.
There was a camp. It's a long name. It's something like Camp Honolulu. I'm not doing it. And so there were some suspected people that were put in those camps. But Hawaii, the difference was that, the Japanese immigrants and some Americans of Japanese ancestry made up a big part of the labor force. Sugar cane.
Yeah, okay.
And so they were not mass incarcerated. Although people who think that there was no camp in Hawaii are mistaken. There was, but it wasn't this policy in Hawaii of just mass incarcerating anyone of Japanese ancestry on the West Coast. That's what happened on the mainland.
Okay, thank you.
I can find out more details about that camp if you'd like.
Oh, no, that's all right. I was just curious. I just hadn't thought about it. I mean, I have friends who are Japanese Americans from Hawaii, so I just hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, well, here's an interesting little tidbit. When the New York production of the show went to Honolulu for, I think, 6 performances. And on opening night, I was sitting in the audience, and there's a lot of Japanese Americans who live in Honolulu there. And when the scene came up with the dog, and the redneck guy says, "Get out of my country, you fucking Jap," there was this audible gasp from the audience around me, and I looked to see who was gasping, and it was, some of the Japanese American members of the audience. And I thought, wow, is that new to you? Because if we do the play here, I don't think anybody is going to gasp because we've heard it so many times. It never stops being horrible, but it's nothing new. And I talked with them afterwards, and they said, it didn't happen here like it happened on the mainland. Some people were in prison and were in camps, but we were in the majority here. And our experience growing up has not been that we are a minority. So that was a very interesting experience, and the artistic director of the Honolulu Theater for Youth, when we were doing it, we talked about maybe doing some future projects together, and I proposed some ideas about young Asian American children finding their identity. And he said, that wouldn't really resonate here because we don't have the identity problem that you have on the mainland because we're not a minority here. So maybe I've gone off on a little tangent there, but I thought it might be interesting.
I was in Hawaii for the first time, I think 2-3 years ago, and I definitely felt culture shock because I realized for the first time, like, oh man, everybody looks like me, and people were not only speaking Tagalog, they were speaking Ilocano, which is the language that my family speaks that I hardly ever hear on the mainland.
Yeah.
So it was a really different experience, and I did not expect it to be that way.
I'm wondering if, I know we only have a little time left, but the sort of local angle of the story is fascinating to me in that the picture, of course, the sort of big famous picture of Santa Anita as a detention center, and one of our board members, and maybe you know the story, I don't know, I have not verified it, so I might be speaking things that are true, but one of my board members here said that one of the churches here in Pasadena became a sanctuary and held Japanese families and wouldn't release them. Do you know anything about that?
Wow, I've never heard about that.
It was one of, right over here, it was one of them. And so, and I mentioned it to one of our friends, and they said, it's true, it's her church, and they did this, and I think it was an Episcopalian church or something that did it, and I think there's an interesting, Girlie and I are exploring that for a post-show.
Was it All Saints Episcopalian Church?
It might have been, it sounds familiar, but...
And also to connect it now, there was a recent church in the news that said, like, we are a sanctuary institution. We're going to hold.
Well, that's I was listening to, I think it was a podcast. I apologize, but I was listening to something, and the whole idea of sanctuary city, what they were talking about, is that actually came from sanctuary churches, and it really came. It went really far back to immigrants who were coming from countries where they were being killed, and if they were going to be sent back, they would be killed, and so they were morally. They were morally opposed. They said, we'd rather break U.S. law as a church than send someone to their death. That they said it's not a choice.
I was listening to that on NPR last night.
I didn't know that. That's.
But so we're going to explore that, and we'll get more. We'll get back to you on that because that's a fascinating. It just makes it. I think whenever you're telling stories like this, there's a little bit of being removed from it. But especially because we're not all taught this in schools, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And the idea of, especially with the Playhouse being here for 100 years, and this was 75 years ago, there's sort of the thing of like, this building was in operation when this was going on.
Yeah.
And that to me is a really fascinating, like we had plays that season.
Yeah.
Right? Think about that. Like there were shows going on here.
No, totally.
And it's it puts it in context, so we're going to explore a little bit about that. But does anyone have anything else? We don't want to take your time. When do you come back, by the way?
Oh, I'm coming back on in early April, like the 3rd or the 4th.
She's acting in a play right now, which is why she.
I'm acting in
Valina's play.
Acting in Valina Houston's play.
Yes. But she'll be back. We will have Jeannie here with us a lot. So you'll get to interact with her more. But
I'll just mention one more thing that really kind of made this very current all over again for me. In the travel ban that was issued, or the challenge to the travel ban, the first one from Washington State, the governor of Washington, Jay Inslee, I think his name is, he grew up on Bainbridge Island, which was mentioned in the play as the first place that the Japanese had to leave. And he said Bainbridge Island is a very tight-knit community because it is an island. And they, the editors of Bainbridge Island newspaper, one of the very few editors in the country to stick up and defend the Japanese Americans. And there were stories about how even the guardsmen, at the docks when they were leaving on the ferries were crying because they're such a close-knit community, and Jay Inslee said that forever colored his view of, the danger of race hysteria and racism. And it's one reason why he felt so strongly they had to challenge Trump's travel ban. And then the state of Hawaii joined them, and I think initiated the challenge to the second travel ban. And I read that one of the lead attorneys, and that was the man named Neil Katyal. Well, Neil had been inspired by Gordon Hirabayashi when he was in law school, and went on to become the Solicitor General in President Obama's cabinet for a brief time when Elena Kagan, who held that position, was tapped for the Supreme Court. And Neil actually came to see Holy's Truths when we were in New York and gave a talk about how he advocated to President Obama that Gordon Hirabayashi should posthumously receive the Medal of Freedom. So Neil is still,
connected to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So those two events and the challenges to the travel bans made me feel like this story is living now. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We're so excited
you.
for the play, but also to have you here with us throughout the whole thing.
Yes, I'll give you a call as soon as I get back.
Excellent.
Any help, please let me know.
Come hug everyone. Thank you.
Bye,
We'll see you
Jeanne.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Get in there, Jack.